Hi everyone, welcome to the channel After All That Years.
I never imagined I'd be the kind of man who discovers his wife's affair through her phone at 3 in the morning. But here we are. At 52 years old, after nearly 9 years of marriage to Janet, I'm sitting in a cheap motel room, wondering how I got everything so wrong. Janet is 39, the kind of woman who lights up every room she enters. People have always been drawn to her energy, her laugh, that natural charisma that made me fall for her in the first place. But last Saturday night, that same magnetic personality became the instrument of my humiliation. Our friend Greg was throwing one of his usual gatherings at his house. Nothing fancy, just wine, music, and the usual crowd of couples from our social circle. Janet thrives at these events. She becomes this vibrant version of herself that everyone wants to be around. I've always been more of a background person, content to nurse a beer and talk shop with the other husbands while she works the room. Saturday started like any other party night. Janet chose this form-fitting navy dress that showed off her figure beautifully. Walking in beside her, I felt that familiar pride. This stunning woman chose me. But there was also that nagging awareness of how other men looked at her, something I'd learned to live with over the years. The evening began innocently enough. I found myself in the kitchen with a few guys, discussing the usual topics. Work frustrations, weekend plans, the local team's chances this season. Meanwhile, Janet was doing what she does best, moving through the crowd like she owned the place, laughing at stories, touching people's arms when she talked, being the social butterfly I married. Then I noticed him. A guy I'd never seen before. Tall, athletic, wearing clothes that screamed success and confidence. His name was Marcus, apparently a colleague of Greg's from his consulting firm. What caught my attention wasn't just his presence, but how Janet's entire demeanor shifted when she started talking to him. You know how you can tell when someone's genuinely interested versus just being polite? Janet wasn't being polite. She was leaning in too close, laughing too loudly at things that weren't particularly funny, playing with her hair in that way she used to do when we were dating. My stomach started doing uncomfortable flips. When the group decided to play some card game that required partnerships, Janet immediately gravitated toward Marcus. I ended up paired with someone's wife, who kept apologizing for not understanding the rules. I tried to focus on the game, but my attention kept drifting to Janet and Marcus. They were whispering, sharing looks, and there was this electricity between them that made me feel invisible. After the card game ended, Janet announced she needed another glass of wine and asked Marcus to join her in the kitchen. That's when I knew something was seriously wrong. I wanted to follow them, to break up whatever was happening, but I didn't want to cause a scene. So I stayed put, pretending to listen to some story about someone's vacation, while my marriage potentially crumbled in the next room. When they returned, Janet looked different. Her cheeks were flushed, her smile seemed forced, and there was this guilty energy radiating from her. Marcus, on the other hand, looked pleased with himself, like he'd just won something valuable. The breaking point came around midnight when Greg suggested a group photo. As we all gathered in the living room, I moved to stand next to my wife. Seemed natural enough, but Janet turned to me with this strange smile and said, "Why don't you let Marcus stand here instead? Just for fun." Everyone laughed like it was some harmless joke, and I forced myself to smile along, but inside, I was dying. Then Janet did something that I'll never forget as long as I live. She reached for Marcus's hand, held it up for everyone to see, and looked directly at me. "Don't worry, honey," she said with that same twisted smile. "It's just for tonight." The room went dead quiet. I could feel every pair of eyes on me, waiting to see how I'd react. But I couldn't react. I was frozen, paralyzed by the public humiliation and the casual cruelty of what she'd just done. Janet let go of his hand a moment later and laughed like nothing had happened, but the damage was done. I stayed at that party longer than I should have. Not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't figure out how to leave. My legs felt heavy, my throat was dry, and I kept replaying what had just happened. Was this really my wife? Was this really my life? Janet continued mingling as if she hadn't just destroyed me in front of our friends. Marcus toned down his behavior after that. Maybe he realized he'd gotten what he came for. Our friends either avoided looking at me or gave me those awkward, sympathetic glances that somehow made everything worse. Finally, Janet appeared beside me and said, "Ready to go," in the most casual tone imaginable. She didn't wait for an answer, just grabbed her coat, said goodbye to everyone with that bright smile, and headed for the door. I followed her like a lost dog, too stunned to do anything else. The drive home was torture. Janet sat in the passenger seat, scrolling through her phone like it was just another Saturday night. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached, the silence between us thick with unspoken words. I kept glancing at her, this woman I thought I knew, and she looked completely at peace. Content even, like she'd had the time of her life. About halfway home, I finally managed to speak. "What was that back there?" She looked up from her phone, feigning confusion. "What was what?" "You know exactly what I'm talking about," I said, my voice shaking. "That whole thing with Marcus, the hand-holding, that comment you made." Janet rolled her eyes. "Oh, for crying out loud, it was a joke. Don't be so dramatic." "Dramatic?" I could barely control my voice. "You humiliated me in front of all our friends. You held another man's hand and told me it was just for tonight. What am I supposed to think?" She sighed heavily, like I was being unreasonable. "You're completely overreacting. Marcus is just a friend. It was harmless fun." "Harmless?" I nearly shouted. "Do you have any idea how that looked? How it made me feel?" Her expression hardened. "You're being ridiculous. I can't even enjoy myself at a party without you getting all jealous and insecure. Grow up, Alan." Her words hit me like physical blows, jealous and insecure. Was that really how she saw me? I tried to explain how inappropriate her behavior had been, but she brushed off every concern like I was being paranoid. "I'm going to bed," she announced as we pulled into our driveway, getting out of the car and slamming the door behind her. I sat there for several minutes, gripping the steering wheel and staring at our darkened house. My mind was spinning with questions I didn't want to ask. When I finally went inside, Janet was already in bed with her back turned to me. I couldn't bring myself to lie down next to her, so I spent the night on the couch, staring at the ceiling and wondering if I was losing my mind. The morning after the party, I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. My neck was stiff from the couch, my head was pounding, and my heart felt like it had been put through a meat grinder. The events of the previous night played on repeat in my mind. Every humiliating moment, every dismissive word from Janet. When I dragged myself to the kitchen, Janet was already there with her coffee and phone, acting like it was any other Sunday morning. She didn't even acknowledge me when I walked in, which somehow hurt more than an argument would have. "Morning," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Morning," she replied without looking up. I poured myself coffee and sat across from her, hoping she might say something. An apology, an explanation, anything that would make sense of what had happened, but she just kept scrolling through her phone, completely absorbed in whatever was on the screen. The silence was unbearable. "Janet," I finally said, "we need to talk about last night." She sighed and put down her phone, finally meeting my eyes. "What now, Alan?" "What now?" I couldn't believe her attitude. "You humiliated me in front of our friends. You acted completely inappropriately with that Marcus guy. How can you sit there acting like nothing happened?" Her eyes narrowed. "Alan, I told you last night. It was a joke. You're making this into something it isn't." "I know what I saw," I said, my voice getting stronger. "You were flirting with him all evening. You were touching him, laughing at everything he said. You didn't even seem to remember I was there." She rolled her eyes and crossed her arms. "Marcus is just a friend. You're being paranoid." "Paranoid?" I felt my anger rising. "You think I'm paranoid? because I don't want my wife holding hands with another man, because I don't want to be made to look like a fool. Her expression turned cold. What do you want me to say, Alan? That I'm sorry. Fine. I'm sorry. Are you happy now? It wasn't even close to what I needed to hear. Her apology was hollow, mechanical, something to shut me up rather than a genuine acknowledgement of what she'd done. Janet, I said, trying to stay calm, I need you to be honest with me. Is there something going on between you and Marcus? For just a split second, I thought I saw something flicker in her eyes. Guilt, maybe? But then she laughed, a harsh sound that made my skin crawl. Oh my God, Alan, you think I'm having an affair because I made a joke at a party. Do you hear how crazy that sounds? I wanted to believe her. Part of me desperately wanted to accept her words and pretend everything was fine. But something deep in my gut was telling me there was more to this story. The rest of that Sunday was miserable. Janet avoided me whenever possible, disappearing into the bedroom or the backyard when I tried to bring up the subject again. I felt like a stranger in my own house, walking around while this terrible weight pressed down on my chest. By evening, I couldn't take the uncertainty anymore. If Janet wasn't going to give me answers, I'd have to find them myself. While she was in the shower, I did something I never thought I'd stoop to. I went through her phone. My hands were shaking as I entered her passcode. I told myself I wasn't looking for anything specific, just something to either ease my fears or confirm them. What I found made my blood turn to ice. There were text messages from Marcus. Not just a few, but dozens of them, going back weeks. They weren't explicitly romantic, but there was an intimacy in their tone that made me sick to my stomach. Marcus, last night was incredible. Can't stop thinking about it. Janet, you're terrible. But yes, me too. We should do it again soon. Marcus, let's keep this between us for now, okay? Janet, obviously, don't want to complicate things. Keep this between us. My hands were trembling as I scrolled through more messages, finding inside jokes, flirty banter, and references to meetings I knew nothing about. It wasn't explicit, but it didn't need to be. The subtext was crystal clear. When Janet came out of the shower, I was still sitting at the kitchen table with her phone in my hand. She froze when she saw me, her eyes immediately going to the device. Alan, she said, slowly, her voice carefully controlled. What are you doing? I looked up at her, my face pale and my hands shaking. You tell me, Janet? What am I supposed to think when I see messages like this? Her expression shifted from shock to fury in an instant. You went through my phone? Are you serious? That's a complete invasion of privacy. Privacy! I shot back, my voice rising. You've been texting Marcus behind my back, making plans to keep things secret. How am I supposed to feel about that? It's nothing, she yelled, her face red with anger. He's a friend, Alan. Just a friend. I can't believe you'd violate my privacy over something so stupid. Her deflection only made me angrier. You think this is stupid? You're hiding things from me, Janet. You're lying to me. How am I supposed to trust you after this? She didn't answer. Instead, she stormed out of the kitchen and slammed the bedroom door behind her. I sat there in the silence, my heart pounding and my mind racing. Our marriage was falling apart, and I felt completely powerless to stop it. The next morning, Janet acted like nothing had happened. She kissed my cheek, asked what we were having for dinner, and started chatting about her day as if our confrontation the night before had never occurred. Her ability to compartmentalize was almost impressive. Almost, but not quite. We need to talk, I said, cutting her off mid-sentence. She froze for a second, her smile faltering. About what? You know exactly what, I said firmly. About Marcus. About those messages. About everything. Her face hardened and she crossed her arms. Are you seriously still harping on this? I told you there's nothing going on. You're creating drama where none exists. Stop, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Stop brushing this off like it doesn't matter. I saw the messages, Janet. I saw how you told him to keep things between you. You've been hiding things from me, and I need to know why. Her jaw tightened, and for a moment I thought she was going to snap back with another dismissive comment. Instead, she sighed and looked away, her shoulders slumping slightly. Alan, I didn't tell you because I knew you'd overreact. Overreact? I repeated, incredulous. Do you even listen to yourself? You've been secretly communicating with another man, flirting with him, and somehow I'm the one who's wrong? It wasn't flirting, she shouted, finally losing her composure. It was just harmless conversation. Marcus and I were just talking. It didn't mean anything. Didn't mean anything? I shot back. Do you think I'm stupid, Janet? Do you think I can't tell when there's more going on than you're admitting? Because those messages sure didn't look like nothing to me. She didn't respond. Instead, she turned and walked toward the bedroom, slamming the door behind her again. I stood there, my fists clenched at my sides, trying to process what had just happened. That night I couldn't sleep. I stayed up on the couch, my mind churning with questions that had no good answers. How long had this been going on? Was it just Marcus, or were there others? And most importantly, what was I going to do about it? The next morning, Janet left for work without saying goodbye. The moment she was gone, I grabbed my phone and called Greg. He was the one who'd introduced Marcus to our group, and I needed to know more about him. Hey man, I said when he picked up. Got a minute? Sure, Greg replied, sounding a bit surprised. What's up? It's about Marcus, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. How well do you know him? There was a pause. Pretty well, I guess. We've worked together for about 3 years. Why? I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. I just noticed Janet talking to him quite a bit at the party. They seemed close. Greg let out a low whistle. Yeah, I noticed that too. I didn't want to say anything, but Marcus has a bit of a reputation. My stomach dropped. What kind of reputation? He's known for being a charmer, Greg said carefully, especially with married women. He's caused some drama at work because of it. I thought you knew. I felt like the ground had opened up beneath me. No, I said quietly. I didn't know. Look, I'm not saying anything's going on, Greg added quickly. But just keep your eyes open, you know? After I hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring at the phone. Greg's words had confirmed my worst fears. Marcus wasn't just some harmless colleague. He was a predator who specifically targeted married women. And Janet, well, she wasn't exactly fighting him off. When Janet came home that evening, I was waiting for her in the living room. She looked surprised to see me sitting there in the dim light. What's this? She asked, setting down her purse. We need to talk, I said, my voice calm but determined. She sighed. Alan, I'm tired. Can't this wait? No, I said, standing up. It can't. She stared at me for a moment, then crossed her arms. Fine. What is it? I talked to Greg today, I said, watching her reaction carefully. Her eyes flickered and she shifted uncomfortably. He told me about Marcus, I continued, about his reputation, about how he targets married women. She opened her mouth to respond, but I held up a hand to stop her. Don't, I said. Don't lie to me again, Janet. Not this time. Her face went pale, and for the first time I saw a crack in her armor. Alan, just tell me the truth, I said, my voice breaking. I deserve that much. Janet hesitated, her eyes darting around the room like she was searching for an escape route. Her hands were fidgeting with her purse strap, a nervous habit I hadn't seen in years. For a moment I thought she might actually be honest with me, and my heart clenched in anticipation. Alan, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. You're making this sound much worse than it is. Marcus is just someone I've been talking to. It's nothing serious. I stared at her, my jaw tightening. Talking to, Janet. You told him to keep things between you. That doesn't sound like casual conversation. she sighed, her shoulders slumping as if the weight of the conversation was too much. Fine, she said, her voice taking on a sharper edge. I enjoy his attention. Is that what you want to hear? I like feeling noticed. Her words hit me like a physical blow. Noticed? I repeated. Janet, I'm your husband. If you needed attention, why didn't you come to me? Why him? She avoided my gaze, her silence speaking volumes. My chest felt tight, the air in the room suddenly too thin. Janet, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. Have you? Have you been with him? Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with what looked like indignation. What? No! Alan, I would never… She stopped herself, her face flushing red. I mean, it hasn't gone that far. Hasn't gone that far? I echoed, my voice trembling. What exactly does that mean? She threw her hands up in frustration. It means exactly what it sounds like, Alan. We've talked, we've flirted, but that's it. Nothing physical. God, you act like I'm some kind of monster. I wanted to believe her, but the cracks in her story were impossible to ignore. So you expect me to believe that all this sneaking around, all these secret messages, were just innocent flirting? Yes, she snapped, her eyes blazing. You're turning this into something it's not. I stood there staring at her, my mind spinning. I wanted to scream, to demand more answers, but I could see that I wasn't going to get the whole truth. Not tonight, anyway. She was too defensive, too eager to make me the villain in this story. I need some air, I muttered, grabbing my jacket and heading for the door. Alan, don't do this, she called after me, but I didn't stop. I needed space, needed to think. I ended up at a small park near our house, sitting on a bench under a streetlight. The cold night air bit at my skin, but I barely noticed. My mind was too busy dissecting our conversation, analyzing every word, every expression. Was she telling the truth? Had it really just been harmless flirting, or was she lying to protect herself? And if she was lying, how far had it really gone? I thought about our marriage, about the years we'd spent together, the life we'd built. I thought about the woman I'd fallen in love with, and I wondered if that woman still existed, or if I'd lost her to someone else. The next few days passed in a blur of tension and avoidance. Janet and I barely spoke, the atmosphere in our house thick enough to cut with a knife. She went about her routines like nothing had changed, but I could see the cracks in her facade. She avoided eye contact, kept conversations brief, and spent an unusual amount of time on her phone. I, on the other hand, couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. Her partial confession had done nothing to ease my suspicions. In fact, it had only made them worse. If she could admit to enjoying Marcus's attention, what else was she hiding? And what did she mean by, "It hasn't gone that far"? How far had it gone? One evening, as Janet sat on the couch with her phone, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I needed the truth, and if she wasn't going to give it to me willingly, I'd have to find it myself. Janet, I said, breaking the silence, can we please talk about this? She sighed without looking up. Alan, we've talked about this. What more do you want me to say? I want the complete truth, I said, my voice firmer than before. All of it, not just the parts you think I can handle. She finally looked at me, her eyes flashing with irritation. I've given you the truth, Alan. I don't know what else you want from me. I want you to explain why you've been sneaking around, I said, my voice rising. I want to know why you think it's okay to humiliate me in front of our friends and then act like I'm the problem. Her face hardened. I told you, nothing happened. Marcus and I are friends. If you can't accept that, then maybe you need to take a hard look at yourself. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was still twisting everything, still making me out to be the unreasonable one. This isn't about me, Janet, I said. This is about your choices. This is about respect and trust. She stood up, her face red with anger. You know what, Alan? I'm done with this conversation. You clearly don't trust me, and I'm not going to keep defending myself. And with that, she stormed off to the bedroom, slamming the door behind her. I sat there in stunned silence, my hands trembling with frustration. The next morning, Janet was already gone when I woke up. Part of me was relieved not to face another confrontation, but another part of me felt the growing distance between us like a physical ache. Later that day, I decided to take matters into my own hands. If Janet wasn't going to tell me the truth, maybe Marcus would. It was a long shot, but I couldn't just sit around doing nothing anymore. I found his contact information easily enough. It was right there in Janet's phone from all their messaging. After pacing around the house for what felt like hours, I finally worked up the courage to call him. The phone rang twice before he answered. "Hello?" His voice was casual, almost cheerful, and it made my stomach turn. "Marcus," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "This is Alan, Janet's husband." There was a pause, and I could almost hear him processing this unexpected development. "Oh, hey, Alan. What's up?" "I think you know what's up," I said, my tone sharpening. "I need to know what's going on between you and my wife." His laugh was short and nervous. "Look, man, I don't know what she's told you, but it's really nothing. We're just friends." "Just friends," I repeated, my grip tightening on the phone. Because from where I'm standing, it doesn't look that way. "Alan, I swear it's nothing," he said quickly. "Yeah, we've texted, and maybe I've been a little flirty, but it doesn't mean anything. She's not interested in me like that." Something about his tone made my skin crawl. He sounded too rehearsed, too eager to deflect. "Not interested?" I said. "Then why did she tell you to keep things between you?" He hesitated, and I could hear him scrambling for an answer. "I don't know, man. Maybe she didn't want to upset you over nothing. I swear nothing has happened." I wanted to believe him. God, how I wanted to believe him. But there was something in the way he said it, something that didn't ring true. "You're lying," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "And if you think I'm going to just let this slide, you're dead wrong." "Look, I don't want any trouble," he said, his tone shifting to defensive. "I'm not the bad guy here." "Then tell me the truth," I demanded. "All of it. Or I swear I'll find another way to get it." There was a long pause, and for a moment I thought he might finally crack, but instead he just sighed and said, "You're wasting your time, Alan. There's nothing to tell." And with that, he hung up. Marcus's dismissal left me more frustrated than ever. He wasn't going to crack, and Janet wasn't giving me anything either. The weight of not knowing the full truth was eating me alive, and I couldn't keep living in this limbo of suspicion and doubt. When Janet came home that evening, she seemed surprised to see me sitting in the living room, waiting for her. "You're home early," she said casually, setting her purse on the counter. "We need to talk," I said, standing up. My voice was calm, but inside I was anything but. She groaned, clearly annoyed. "Again, Alan? I don't know how many times I have to tell you—" "Cut the act, Janet," I interrupted, my voice sharper than I intended. "I called Marcus today." Her face went completely white, the color draining from her cheeks like someone had pulled a plug. "You what?" "I called him," I repeated. I wanted to hear his side of the story. "And do you know what he said?" "He said you weren't interested in him like that." But the way he said it, Janet, he was lying. "And I think you are too." She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like she couldn't decide what to say. Finally, she crossed her arms and said, "You had no right to call him. That's completely crossing a line." Crossing a line?" I shot back, incredulous. "You're the one who's been hiding things from me, lying to me, and you want to talk about crossing lines?" Her face hardened. "I've already told you the truth, Alan. If you can't handle it, that's your problem." "Do you think I'm stupid?" I asked, my voice rising. "Do you honestly think I can't tell when someone is lying to me? Because I can, Janet. I can tell." She threw her hands up in frustration. "Fine. Believe whatever you want. I'm done trying to convince you." And just like that, She stormed off to the bedroom, slamming the door behind her. I stood there shaking with anger and frustration. This wasn't just about Marcus anymore. This was about trust, about the foundation of our marriage crumbling beneath my feet. Later that night, when Janet was asleep, I made a decision that I'm still not proud of. I went through her phone again, but this time I dug deeper. I checked her deleted messages, her cloud backup, her email, anything that might give me the answers I desperately needed. And then I found them. Hidden in a backup folder were messages that had been deleted from her main thread with Marcus, messages that made my worst fears look tame by comparison. They weren't just flirtatious. They were explicit. Plans to meet up, descriptions of what they had done together, promises to keep their affair secret. The messages painted a picture that made me physically sick. This wasn't some innocent flirtation that had gotten out of hand. This was a full-blown affair, complete with hotel rooms, elaborate cover stories, and detailed discussions about how to keep it hidden from me. I sat there staring at the screen, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Everything I had suspected, everything I had feared, was right there in black and white. Janet had been lying to me for months, living a double life while I slept peacefully beside her every night. The betrayal was complete and devastating. But what hurt almost as much was how stupid I felt. How many signs had I missed? How many times had she looked me in the eye and lied? How many times had she come home from being with him and kissed me goodnight? I forwarded the messages to my email and put her phone back on the nightstand. Then I grabbed my car keys and left the house. I couldn't be there, not with her sleeping peacefully in the next room while my entire world collapsed around me. I drove aimlessly for hours, tears blurring my vision as the city lights streaked past. I replayed our entire relationship in my mind, searching for clues I'd missed, trying to figure out when the woman I loved had become a stranger. Eventually, I found myself in an empty parking lot, staring out at the dark horizon. The weight of betrayal sat on my chest like a crushing stone. I wanted to scream, to break something, to make the pain stop. But all I could do was sit there and let it wash over me. When I finally drove home, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't keep living this lie. Couldn't keep pretending that our marriage was salvageable. The evidence was right there on my phone. Janet had betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible. I walked into our bedroom and turned on the light. Janet stirred, blinking up at me in sleepy confusion. "Alan, what are you doing? It's the middle of the night." "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. She must have heard something in my tone, because her expression shifted from confusion to unease. "Now? Can't it wait until morning?" "No," I said firmly. "It can't." Her eyes narrowed as she sat up in bed. "What's this about?" I pulled out my phone and opened the screenshots I'd taken of the deleted messages. Without a word, I handed it to her, my hand surprisingly steady. She took the phone, her eyes scanning the screen. I watched as her face went through a series of emotions: confusion, recognition, and then pure panic. "Where did you get this?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Don't," I said, cutting her off. "Don't turn this around on me. I want the truth, Janet. All of it. Right now." She looked down at the phone, then back up at me. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. The game was over, and she knew it. "Alan, I didn't mean for it to happen," she said, tears welling up in her eyes. "Didn't mean for what to happen?" I asked, my voice rising. "How long has this been going on? How many times have you lied to my face?" She looked away, her hands trembling as she set the phone down on the bed. "It started about 4 months ago," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was just supposed to be. I don't know. Fun. Nothing serious." "Nothing serious?" I repeated, my voice shaking with rage. "You call sneaking around behind my back, lying to me, humiliating me in front of our friends, nothing serious?" She flinched at my words, but I wasn't done. Not even close. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I continued. my voice breaking. Do you understand that you've destroyed us? That you've destroyed me? I know, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I know, and I'm sorry. I never wanted it to go this far. Her apology felt hollow, meaningless. How do you apologize for months of betrayal? How do you take back the lies, the deception, the complete disregard for your spouse's feelings? I don't want to hear that you're sorry, I said, my voice cold. I want to know exactly what happened. Every detail, every lie, every time you looked me in the eye and pretended everything was fine. She wiped at her tears with the back of her hand, her whole body shaking. Alan, please. I don't want to hurt you more than I already have. I let out a bitter laugh. Hurt me? Janet, you've already done the worst thing you could possibly do. There's nothing left to protect me from. She took a shuddering breath, her gaze fixed on the comforter. It started at a work conference, she began, her voice so quiet I had to strain to hear her. Marcus was there, representing Greg's company, and we ended up at the hotel bar after the sessions ended. I felt like I was going to be sick, but I needed to hear this. I needed to know the full extent of her betrayal. At first, it really was just talking, she continued. He was charming, funny. He made me feel, I don't know, special. Like I was the most interesting person in the room. And I didn't? I asked, the words coming out harsher than I intended. She looked up at me, fresh tears in her eyes. It wasn't about you, Alan. It was about me feeling like I'd lost myself somewhere along the way. So you decided to find yourself in another man's bed? The words tasted like poison in my mouth. She flinched again. It wasn't like that at first. We just talked that night, exchanged numbers, said we'd keep in touch as friends. But it didn't stay that way, I said. It wasn't a question. She shook her head. A few weeks later, he texted me, said he was in town for another meeting and asked if I wanted to grab coffee. I told myself it was innocent, just two friends catching up. But it wasn't, I said flatly. No, she whispered. It wasn't. We ended up talking for hours. He told me I was beautiful, that I deserved better than... She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Better than what, Janet? Better than your husband who loved you. Better than the life we built together. She couldn't meet my eyes. He made me feel alive again, Alan, like I was worth something. And I didn't? The question came out as barely more than a whisper. She finally looked at me, and I saw something in her expression that cut deeper than all the lies. Pity. She pitied me. It's complicated, she said softly. No, it's not, I replied, my voice growing stronger. You chose him over me, over us. How many times, Janet? She was crying openly now, her whole body shaking. Alan, please. How many times? I repeated, my voice like steel. 6, she whispered. Maybe 7. I tried to stop it. I really did, but you didn't, I finished for her. You chose to keep going back to him while lying to my face every single day. The number hit me like a physical blow. 6 or 7 times. Not just once in a moment of weakness. Not just a mistake, but a pattern of deliberate betrayal, spanning months. Did you ever think about me? I asked, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. When you were with him, did you ever think about what this would do to me if I found out? She sobbed harder, her hands covering her face. I tried not to think about it at all. I wanted to feel something other than invisible. Invisible? I stood up, pacing to the window and back. You were never invisible to me, Janet. Never. I know, she choked out. I know that now, but at the time I felt like we were just going through the motions, like we were roommates instead of husband and wife. So instead of talking to me about it, instead of trying to work on our marriage, you decided to have an affair. It wasn't supposed to be an affair, she protested weakly. It was supposed to be just. I don't know what I thought it was supposed to be. I stared at her, This woman I'd shared a life with for nearly a decade, and I realized I didn't know her at all. The Janet I'd married would never have done this. Or maybe she would have, and I'd just been too blind to see it. The party, I said suddenly. That night at Greg's. Was that some kind of game to you? Were you trying to hurt me on purpose? Her face crumpled. I'd had too much wine. Marcus was being flirty, and I guess I got caught up in the attention. When I saw how upset you were getting, I should have stopped. But instead, She shook her head. I don't know why I did that. It was cruel. Yes, it was, I agreed. It was the cruelest thing you could have done. We sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of her confession hanging between us like a physical presence. I felt empty, hollowed out, like someone had reached inside me and scraped away everything that mattered. What happens now? She asked quietly. I looked at her, really looked at her, for what I realized would probably be the last time as her husband. The woman sitting on our bed, crying and broken, wasn't the woman I'd married. She was a stranger who'd been wearing Janet's face, living Janet's life, while the real Janet had disappeared somewhere along the way. I don't know, I said honestly. I need time to think. Alan, please, she said, reaching for my hand. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But maybe we can work through this. Maybe we can work through this. I pulled my hand away. Janet, you've been living a double life for months. You've lied to me every single day. You humiliated me in front of our friends. You chose another man over me repeatedly. What exactly do you think we can work through? Our marriage, she said desperately. 9 years, Alan. We've been together for 9 years. That has to mean something. I felt a terrible sadness wash over me. It did mean something, but you threw it away the moment you decided Marcus was worth more than our vows. She was sobbing again, but I felt detached from her pain. My own hurt was too overwhelming to leave room for anyone else's. I'm going to stay in a hotel tonight, I said, grabbing some clothes from the dresser. I need space to figure out what comes next. Don't go, she pleaded. Please, Alan. Let's talk about this. Let's figure it out together. There's nothing left to figure out, I said quietly. You made your choice months ago. Now I have to make mine. I packed a small bag while she watched, still crying, still begging me to stay. But I couldn't. Not anymore. The man who had woken up that morning, still hoping his wife might love him enough to tell him the truth, was gone. In his place was someone I didn't recognize yet. Someone harder, sadder, but maybe stronger too. As I reached the bedroom door, I turned back to look at her one last time. For what it's worth, I said, I really did love you. More than I've ever loved anyone. I love you too, she whispered. I shook my head. No, Janet, you don't. You can't. Because if you did, none of this would have happened. And with that, I walked out of the bedroom, out of the house, and out of the marriage that had defined my adult life. The hotel room I checked into was nothing special. Just a bed, a desk, and a television that I couldn't bring myself to turn on. I sat on the edge of the mattress and stared at the wall, my mind struggling to process everything that had happened. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from Janet, each one more desperate than the last. Please come home. We can work this out. I know I messed up, but I'll do anything to fix this. Alan, I'm begging you. Don't give up on us. I turned the phone off and tossed it onto the nightstand. There was nothing she could say that would change what she'd done. No apology that could undo months of betrayal and lies. I thought about calling someone. A friend, my brother, anyone who might offer some perspective or comfort. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. How do you explain that your wife of 9 years has been cheating on you? How do you admit that you were too stupid or too trusting to see it happening right under your nose? Instead, I just sat there in the quiet hotel room and let the full weight of it all settle over me. My marriage was over. The woman I'd loved and trusted had chosen someone else. Everything I'd thought I knew about my life had been built on lies. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. My neck ached from the unfamiliar pillow. My eyes were swollen from crying, and my heart felt like it had been put through a blender. But underneath all the pain, there was something else, a strange sense of clarity. For months, I'd been questioning my own instincts, wondering if I was being paranoid or jealous. Janet had made me doubt my own perception of reality, made me feel like I was the problem. But now I knew the truth. I hadn't been paranoid. I'd been right all along. My phone showed 17 missed calls from Janet and twice as many text messages. I scrolled through them, but they all said the same thing in different ways. She was sorry. She'd made a mistake. She wanted to fix things. But some things can't be fixed. Some betrayals cut too deep to heal. I spent that day driving around town, thinking about what came next. I'd need to find a lawyer, figure out how to divide our assets, decide what to do about the house. The practical details of ending a marriage were overwhelming, but they also gave me something to focus on, besides the crushing weight of heartbreak. When I finally returned to the house that evening, Janet was waiting for me in the living room. She looked terrible, red-eyed, pale, like she hadn't slept at all. For a moment I felt a flicker of sympathy for her. Then I remembered why she looked that way, and the feeling disappeared. "You came back," she said, standing up hopefully. "Just to get some things," I replied, not meeting her eyes. "We need to talk about next steps." Her face fell. "Next steps?" "The divorce," I said simply. "I'll be filing papers this week." She sat down heavily, like her legs couldn't support her anymore. "Alan, please, can't we at least try counseling? Can't we—" "No," I interrupted. "Janet, what you did. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a moment of weakness. It was months of deliberate choices. You chose him over me, over and over again. There's no coming back from that." "But I love you," she said desperately. "I know I messed up, but I do love you." I looked at her then, really looked at her, and felt nothing but sadness. "I don't think you understand what love is, Janet. Love doesn't lie. Love doesn't cheat. Love doesn't humiliate the person it's supposed to protect." She was crying again, but I'd run out of sympathy for her tears. They felt manipulative now, like everything else about her. "I'll stay at the hotel until we can figure out the arrangements," I said. "I'll have my lawyer contact you about the details." "This is really it?" she asked in a small voice. 9 years, and it's just over." I paused at the door, thinking about her question. 9 years. It sounded like a long time, but what were 9 years built on lies worth? "You ended it months ago," I said finally. "I'm just making it official." 3 months later, I was sitting in my lawyer's office, signing the final divorce papers. Janet had agreed to most of my terms. I think the guilt made her more cooperative than she might have otherwise been. We'd sold the house and split the proceeds. She'd kept her car, I'd kept mine. It was all very civilized and businesslike, which somehow made it even sadder. I haven't seen Janet since the day I moved out. I heard through mutual friends that she and Marcus didn't last long after our marriage ended. Apparently, the thrill wore off once there was no secret to keep. She's dating someone new now, according to Greg's wife. I hope she's learned something from what happened between us, but honestly, I don't think much about her anymore. The hardest part wasn't the anger or the hurt. It was the loneliness. After 9 years of sharing your life with someone, the silence is deafening. I've started going to a support group for people dealing with infidelity. It helps to know I'm not alone, that other people have survived this kind of betrayal. I'm 52 years old, starting over completely. Some days that feels terrifying. Other days it feels like freedom. I'm learning to trust my instincts again, to believe in my own perceptions instead of letting someone else's lies make me doubt myself. Would I do anything differently if I could go back? Maybe I would have confronted Janet sooner, been more direct about what I was seeing. Maybe I would have insisted on counseling when I first noticed the distance between us. But honestly, I don't think it would have changed the outcome. Janet made her choice long before I found those messages. I'm not ready to date yet. I don't know if I'll ever be ready to trust someone that completely again. But I'm working on it. I'm working on myself. I'm learning that my worth isn't defined by someone else's inability to appreciate what they had. The saddest part is that I really did love her. Even now, even knowing everything I know, there's a part of me that misses the woman I thought she was. But that woman was an illusion, a character Janet played when it suited her. The real Janet was someone who could look me in the eye and lie without flinching, someone who could betray the person who trusted her most in the world. I'm better off without that kind of love in my life. Sometimes people ask me if I regret marrying her, if I wish I could erase those 9 years. The answer is complicated. I regret the pain. I regret the lies. I regret the way it ended. But I don't regret loving someone completely, even if they weren't worthy of that love. I don't regret being the kind of person who trusts and commits and believes in marriage vows. Janet's betrayal taught me something important. You can't control other people's choices, but you can control your response to them. I chose not to become bitter or cynical. I chose not to let her actions define my worth or my capacity for love. I chose to believe that there are people in this world who understand the value of loyalty and honesty, even if Janet wasn't one of them. At 52, I'm starting the next chapter of my life. It's not the chapter I planned, but maybe that's okay. Maybe the best stories are the ones we never saw coming. I still drive past our old house sometimes. There's a young family living there now. I see their kids playing in the yard that Janet and I never filled with children of our own. I'm happy for them. I hope they build something real in that house, something honest and lasting. As for me, I'm learning to be content with my own company. I'm rediscovering interests I'd neglected during my marriage. I'm making new friends, strengthening old relationships that I'd let slide over the years. I'm becoming myself again, not just half of a couple that was broken from the start. The pain has faded to a dull ache most days, though it still catches me off guard sometimes. I'll smell a perfume that reminds me of Janet, or hear a song we used to dance to, and for just a moment, the loss feels fresh again. But those moments are getting fewer and farther between. I know now that I deserved better than what Janet gave me. I deserved honesty, faithfulness, respect. I deserved a partner who would work on our marriage instead of seeking excitement elsewhere. Most importantly, I deserved someone who would love me enough to tell me the truth, even when it was hard. I may be alone now, but I'm not lonely in the same way I was when I was married to someone who was already gone. There's peace in that realization, freedom in accepting that some things really can't be fixed. The man who discovered those text messages at 3 a.m. was broken, humiliated, lost. The man writing this story is healing, stronger, and finally at peace with the truth. It's not the ending I wanted, but it's the beginning I needed.